don't speak." The words trembled from the lips of a homeless black woman as she stepped out of the shadows of a city street. Her eyes were sharp, her voice urgent, and her warning was aimed at a decorated four-star general who had just exited a gala dinner. The general froze, confused, caught between instinct and disbelief. The woman was supposed to be invisible, someone people passed by without a glance. Yet in that moment, her voice carried the weight of survival. She had overheard something dangerous, something that could shatter not just one man's life but ripple through corridors of power. And what happened next would prove that sometimes the people society ignores are the ones holding the truth that saves us all. The woman's days were carved from silence and struggle. Each morning, she folded the thin blanket that was her only protection from the cold, tucked it beneath the stairwell she called home, and set off in search of food or work that might cover a single meal. Once, long ago, she had a job, an apartment, neighbors who knew her name. But rent crept higher, wages stayed still, and illness forced her out of work. One bad month became 3, then a year. The city swallowed her dignity piece by piece until she learned invisibility as armor. People rarely met her eyes. To them, she was a cautionary tale, a blur of poverty painted in stereotypes. But invisibility gives you vantage points. From benches, alleys, and sidewalks, she saw everything. She noticed who hurried past, who glanced over shoulders, who whispered in corners thinking no one was listening. She heard the rhythms of the city the way others hear music, the click of polished shoes, the laughter that carried entitlement, the voices that shifted when they spoke to someone with power versus someone without. On that particular night, the street glowed with chandeliers spilling light from the grand hall of a military gala. Generals, dignitaries, and their families had gathered inside to toast victories and honor service. Outside, the woman lingered where warmth leaked through revolving doors. She hoped for discarded food or coins. But as she leaned against a wall, she caught fragments of conversation between two men smoking nearby. Their voices were low, urgent, laced with malice. They weren't just talking about politics or business. They were plotting. She froze, straining to hear. One name stood out clear, the four-star general being honored that night. They spoke of making an example of him, of ensuring his silence on decisions he had resisted. A plan unfurled in whispers, the kind of plan people with power bury beneath civility but that kills just as surely as weapons. The woman's pulse raced. She was no spy, no soldier, but survival had trained her ears sharper than most. She understood enough, danger was minutes away. When the gala ended and the general stepped into the night, medals gleaming, she acted on instinct. She darted from the shadows, blocking his path. Guards tensed, hands on holsters, eyes narrowing at the sight of a ragged woman daring to approach. But her voice cut through their suspicion, "Don't speak." It was not a threat, it was a warning. The general's confusion deepened, but she gestured toward the alley where the men had vanished, and for a flicker of a second, he saw in her eyes something soldiers know, urgency born of truth. The climax unfolded like a fuse catching fire. The general hesitated, then signaled his team to scan the area. Within moments, they uncovered evidence of the plot, a car idling, communication devices, a weapon tucked beneath a seat. The men had vanished, but their plan was clear enough. The general turned back to the woman, and for the first time, someone of his stature looked at her not as a nuisance, but as the reason he was alive. Yet even then, whispers rippled among the guards. Could her word be trusted? Was it chance, or was it real? Racism and bias coiled quickly, eager to dismiss her courage as coincidence. But the evidence was undeniable. And as the investigation spread, the truth surfaced, her warning had disrupted a conspiracy. The general's life, and the stability of decisions only he could make, had been preserved by a woman society left on a sidewalk. The irony struck him harder than any battle had, millions of dollars spent on intelligence, surveillance, and protection, yet the person who saved him had none of those resources, none of that respect, none of the privilege that insulated him every day. In the days that followed, the story could have been buried. She could have returned to the shadows, unnamed and unseen. But the general refused silence. He spoke her name, told her story, and demanded she be treated with the dignity she had always deserved. It was not charity he offered, but recognition and opportunity. He ensured housing, medical care, and work, not as a handout, but as a repayment of a debt no medal could cover. He used his influence to highlight how often society dismisses the wisdom and humanity of those it deems unworthy. the woman's life did not transform overnight into luxury, but it transformed into stability. A bed instead of concrete. Meals instead of scraps. A voice that people listened to instead of silenced. And with stability came something deeper, the chance to heal, to rebuild, to be seen. She never sought fame. She never claimed heroism. She had only done what instinct demanded: listen, act, save a life. But her courage became a lesson far larger than her own survival. The general carried that lesson into every room he entered. He reminded colleagues and politicians that power is not protection, that wisdom is not confined to ranks or uniforms, and that dignity must be extended to those we are trained to ignore. His words carried weight not because of his stars, but because of his humility. He had been saved by the very person most people would cross the street to avoid. And so the story lived on, not as a tale of charity, but as proof of injustice turned inside out. A homeless black woman, invisible to most, had become the center of truth in a world that claimed to value it but rarely recognized it. If a single voice from the shadows can shatter a conspiracy and save a life, what else might we learn if we started listening to the people we ignore? The next time someone overlooked tries to warn you, will you dismiss them, or will you recognize that truth often wears the face we're least prepared to see?